You know, everybody knows my feelings for this club. I've always tried to do the best for the club, for Barça. It's a club that I know well. And the most important thing is to think about the entity, the institution. Yesterday always told him that my job is up to the results. I've received a lot of confidence from the president, from the board, from Rafa, from Nico, Boyan, Deco, the entire board and staff. It was important to have the support of my team as well, my players. We all believe that this project needs to continue. As I told the president, we believe in the stability of the club. I've seen now that this project isn't finished yet. We need to continue. We're working well this entire season. Looks like we will not win any titles, but we have one in the past. And I need the Barça community to understand this, that we need to keep working hard, consolidate the project, and this is the reason why I've changed my decision, and we're with the strength to do so, all of us, to continue to work for the club, to give us our best for the club. It's true that a few months ago, I thought the best decision was to leave, some 3 months ago, but yesterday, in a couple minutes, we understood perfectly well that the best decision was to continue. This is the best decision for the club, the members. I'm very grateful that I can continue, and we are now eager to bring stability to this project and to the club. So thank you, everybody, for your trust.
Well, for more on this, we can speak live now to our Spanish football expert, Graham Hunter, who is in Barcelona. Graham, great to speak to you. And we'll get to the ins and outs of it in just a moment. But we heard Xavi there talking about the project. What do you make of what he's had to say?
Yeah, you're right. Good morning, Joe. Good afternoon to here in Catalonia. Xavi's interesting. He's very articulate. He was asked a host of things. You picked a good cut because he explained why he changed his mind. He keeps calling it this change of direction. But he was asked about, or was forced to comment about, had he only stayed on for the salary? Because there have been stories today in the Catalan press saying that because he's got ongoing tax cases, that maybe he needed to stay. There were stories about the board of directors voting unanimously against keeping him, but the president overruling them. Xavi has knocked both of those for 6. He says that if he had left, then he wasn't going to charge the club for the last year of his contract because he has 1 more year. This is just a change of mind rather than an extension of his contract. And the president said, look, the board didn't take a vote on this, but we were all unanimous in our opinion. So the press conference, you showed a clip where it was very clear-cut and he was very forceful and maybe a little bit emotional about how much he loves the club and all that kind of stuff. The press conference covered a whole range of things, and little wonder, because this is a very bumpy period for the club. It's finances. There are those in the media and amongst the fans who are totally pro-Xavi and others who are much more sceptical about his impact. But if you've watched the football that the team played since he announced he was going to leave early, you can understand the idea behind him staying because the football has improved dramatically, Joe.
Yeah, and given everything that you've been seeing there, Graham, how surprising then was this decision, this U-turn?
Genuinely not so surprising, because every time since at the end of January, having lost at home to Villarreal, he said, I'm going to leave a year early. He said, one, because it's a cruel environment, it's poisonous, I fear for my own mental, emotional well-being and that of my family. That was part one. And he said on the night too, this was for the benefit of the team, for the squad. This will change their ideas, this will shake them up. This is going to be positive for our football that I'm announcing that I'm leaving right now. Totally opposed to the way in which people watched Wayne Rooney saying on your channel last night that Klopp's announcement mid-season has damaged Liverpool. Well, the opposite effect came at Football Club Barcelona. But every time in press conferences, and you know what journalists are like, Joe, He was asked every single press conference, have you changed your mind? Have you changed your mind? And he kept saying, well, up until now, there's no change. Or until today, there's no change. He never went, no, I'm not changing my mind. Stop asking me. And it's not a surprise either for a key reason, which is the vice president and the president, whenever they were asked since January, what are you trying to do? What do you think? They said, we want him to stay. We believe he can be persuaded. He is our candidate to stay. We don't want him to leave. So it just needed Xavi to change his mind, Joe. And that's evidently, I think, for a bunch of reasons, something that hasn't only happened. He's very, very clear cut about wanting to stay and the reasons for him staying. And I think the principal ones are, look at the team, look at the youngsters he's promoted into the team, look at the performances away to Atletico Madrid, where they won handsomely, the only home defeat Atleti have suffered all season, beating the Italian champions, Napoli, going to Paris and beating Paris Saint-Germain very, very nicely indeed, playing well in the Clasico. They lost, but the football was good. I think he believes it's the right time to stay.
And you were talking about some of the reasons there in terms of why he quit in the first place. I mean, some really strong quotes from Xavi when he did quit. You spoke about it there, talking about the cruel environment, this lack of support, the toll it was taking on his mental health. I think he spoke about the club needed a change of dynamic, that his battery kept running out. I mean, it sounds to me like a lot of things would have to change for him to then feel comfortable with staying on in the position. Is that a fair assessment?
So that's a nicely researched question, and it's really well put, and it's at the heart of this. He can't stay simply because he's a club playing legend, maybe the best footballer Barcelona and Spain have ever brought through, in terms of rather than signed or brought over from Argentina like Messi. Xavi stands out as the #1 Spanish footballer all the time. That wins you nothing. That doesn't keep you in a job. The title last season was extraordinary. I think it was against the Tide, and therefore that buys you some credit, as does the Super Cup. But his well-being, the fact that he was so emotional when he announced that he was leaving. Today, he did talk about that in a press conference. He said, it's still a cruel environment. It's still a cruel job. He said, I don't expect that to change, but I knew what I was taking on. He said, I think it'll be like that again all of this season and next season. He said, I feel differently in terms of how the team is playing. I feel differently in terms of my strength and my motivation to cope with that and to carry on. Your point is good. None of the things he didn't just complain about, but he pointed out, and he's also had to sue a couple of journalists. So his point about the environment in which he lives, I know you're not used to the Premier League or the Championship, seeing managers speaking like that about the pressure they're under, how they and their family feel about not just criticism, but attacks. And Xavi's opinion lies. So he's gone to court. He's gone to court over one of those things. So there were substantial things that you touched upon. He now says, I've processed it. I think that the environment in the club is better. I'm happier with the way the team is playing. You can see the improvements. And therefore, I feel more ready to cope with the outside. He's used the word, venomous atmosphere. So you're right, it's still going to be there. It's still for him to cope with at the moment. He just says, well, I'm feeling better about it now.
And Graham, you know as well as I do that as soon as a manager announces that they're going to leave, attention very quickly turns to what's next, who's next for the club. But were Barcelona at all close to appointing a successor?
Appointing a successor, definitely not, Joe. One of our tasks is to filter the words of the club representatives because they don't always feel obliged to tell us the whole truth. The two strong stories were that Hansi Flick, who's free, and remember Barcelona's financial situation is awful, so they did not want to pay any club compensation for levering another manager out of the job. So Hansi Flick and the Mexican centre-half, who started for Barcelona under Rijkaard and then briefly for Pep Guardiola, Rafa Marquez, who's the B team coach, could have been promoted internally without any fee because he's part of the organisation right now. Joan Laporta, the president, said today, we didn't talk to any other coaches. I would treat that with a mindful of salt because they had to be prepared. In fact, they'd be inept if they hadn't. Close to being appointed, no, Joe, I go back to what I said. On the record, Rafa, you stay the vice president, and Joan Laporta said consistently since January, we want to persuade him to stay. We want him to stay. They genuinely thought he was the right man. The football got better and better. And it's not irrelevant that Xavi has promoted two kids from the academy, Lamine Yamal, who he gave a debut to at 15, and now at 16, has 6 caps for Spain, is one of the best players in La Liga. At 16, Joe, I emphasize again. And Pau Cubarsí just turned 17 in January as their sweeper, again, a Catalan lad through the academy, is, I think, at or around, with Rudiger, the best centre-half at 17 in La Liga. Xavi thinks the investment in them, and Pedri when he's fit, and Gavi when he comes back from his ACL ligament injury, means that next season can be better, can be different. There wasn't a new coach ready to be appointed that's now sitting disappointed. Has there been coaches spoken to, Joe? My bet would be yes, there are. And if you're not disappointed at not getting the Barcelona job, then you're a very strange person.
Well, looking ahead to next season then, because of course this season, looking like the title race is over, Barcelona 11 points behind Real Madrid. How much work is there for Xavi to do for them to be able to compete back up there for the title next season?
Enormous work, because they need to not show rust like they did at the beginning of last season. He needs to have a massively better injury record. It was very debilitating. The number of footballers who kept getting muscle injuries, that damaged the first half of their season. And the biggest work they've got to do now, Joe, which is vital, is fighting other teams off the star athletes that they want to keep. The two youngsters that I mentioned are genuinely, note their names, Joe, Lamine Yamal and Pau Cubarsí, are extraordinary, genuinely extraordinary. The queue of clubs trying to get them is enormous. Manchester City made a huge effort to get those two kids in January. Xavi fought tooth and nail to keep them. So in terms of efforts for next season, it's keep the right players. They have to sell one big star. That's unequivocally true to meet financial fair play regulations. So there will be a shopping queue standing outside Barcelona's Camp Nou offices saying, we want Ronald Araujo, we want Frankie de Jong again. But the big thing is, anybody who sets out for next season imagining that Barcelona can be better than Real Madrid is dreaming. Real Madrid's squad is extraordinary. They're about to add Kylian Mbappe. Most of Real Madrid's squad is in the range of 20 to 26. They're on long-term contracts. They look like being dominant for 3 or 4 years, all of which, Joe, I would argue makes Xavi's decision today either extremely brave, extremely optimistic, or maybe a little foolish. I, for one, am glad he's a positive presence in Spanish football to still have.